Everybody, teeth aren't working. May I remind everyone this is a meeting in public and not a public meeting. Only members of the public who have registered to speak are allowed to do so. I will call on them to speak during the appropriate agenda item. This meeting is being held at our offices in Abbey House, Abingdon. Committee members are here in person, but officers and speakers are able to join remotely. The meeting is being streamed live on the Council's YouTube channel for public viewing. This system allows councillors who are unable to attend in person to contribute to the meeting, but only councillors who are present in the room are allowed to vote. Procedure matters. For speakers and other members of the public who have logged in remotely, please ensure that your microphone is muted and that your camera is off for the duration of the meeting until you are called to speak. There's nobody there, yeah. The Planning Committee is a decision-making committee of the Council, and it is important that a set procedure is followed. All committee members have received a full report on each planning application, either in paper or electronically. For each application, we will first hear from the planning officer, followed by the parish or town council, then objectors, supporters and local members. Each group will have 5 minutes to speak to the committee, after which members may ask questions of the speaker. The committee may then ask questions of clarification of the planning officer. It should be noted that committee members and officers may be using electronic devices for reference throughout the meeting. The committee will then debate and vote on the application. Councillors wishing to ask a question or participate in the debate are asked to indicate this by alerting myself or officers by raising a hand. Voting will be a show of hands. Members, please raise your hand clearly and keep it raised to allow a count to take place. If it is unclear how members are voting through a show of hands, I will ask the clerk to undertake a roll call of those present and how they are voting. A few housekeeping announcements. In the event of emergency, please evacuate the building by the nearest exit, which is the corridor immediately to the right of this meeting room, and then go to assembly point 9 in the outside area beyond the fire exit. The Democratic Services officer present will assist you. Can everyone please ensure that their mobile phone is switched to silent or switched off during the meeting? Members of the public who wish to leave the meeting after their application has been heard are welcome to do so by the front door in reception. When the meeting is finished, I will ask for confirmation that the live stream has ended. At that point, please leave the meeting and make your way out of the building, remembering to sign out as you leave. That was agenda item 1. Agenda item 2 is apologies for absence. Have we had apologies?
Yes, Chair, we've had apologies from councillors Ken Arlett and Tim Bearder.
Okay, agenda item 3 is minutes of the previous meeting. It says to follow, they're not ready yet.
Yes.
Yeah, we'll take them at the next meeting.
Yeah.
Declaration, I can't never say this. Declaration of interest. To receive declarations of disposal of pecuniary interests, other registrable interests and non-registrable interests, or any conflicts of interest in respect of items on the agenda for this meeting. I see none, thank goodness. Urgent business?
No, Chair.
No urgent business. So we'll move to the planning items and to agenda item 7. And I'll turn to our planning officer, Paul Lucas, to take us through this application.
Thank you, Chair. This application seeks full planning permission for the demolition of 1 dwelling and erection of 2 dwellings. This application follows on from a previous refusal of planning permission for the demolition of 1 dwelling and the erection of 3 dwellings on the site in 2023. It is a material planning consideration that the previous application was not refused due to a conflict with the Council's housing distribution strategy. Your officers consider that the proposed residential development would constitute development within the built-up area of Henley and therefore supported by Local Plan Policy H1 and Neighbourhood Plan Policy H4, as discussed at paragraphs 7.2 to 7.5 of the report. As outlined in paragraphs 7.8 to 7.14 of the report, Council's landscape officer considers that the current proposal has addressed the first reason for refusal of the previous application, such that it would conserve and enhance the setting of the nearby Chilterns National Landscape. This is based on the use of appropriate materials and planning conditions to secure a revised landscaping scheme and its long-term maintenance and low reflectivity glazing. The introduction and maintenance of significant tree planting would further the conservation and enhancement of the setting of the CNL over time. Council's tree officer has no objection to the proposed tree protection measures for protected trees. Council's Conservation Officer has raised no heritage objections to the loss of the existing building and no harm to the setting of the nearby listed building, as set out in paragraphs 7.6 and 7.7 of the report. Your officers consider that the design of the dwellings and garages would be appropriate to the character of Rotherfield Road. Your officers consider that the interrelationship between the proposed dwellings and their closest neighbours would be acceptable in respect of light, outlook and privacy, due to the level of separation and the current and proposed vegetated boundary conditions, and subject to planning conditions to secure privacy screens for balconies and obscure glazing for upper floor side-facing windows, as covered in paragraph 7.18 to 7.20 of the report. The proposed outdoor amenity space would accord with the design guide recommended standards for dwellings of this size. In the expert opinion of the local highway authority, the proposed access and parking arrangements would not give rise to conditions prejudicial to highway and pedestrian safety in compliance with local plan policy Trans 5, as outlined in paragraph 7.22 of the report. Your officers consider that the requirements of local plan policy EMV2 and EMV3 in relation to biodiversity and protected species respectively would be met by the proposal, subject to the imposition of various planning conditions, thereby addressing the second and third reasons for refusal of the previous application, as set out in paragraph 7.23 to 7.24 of the report. Matters relating to external lighting, drainage and carbon reduction could be dealt with through the recommended conditions to the satisfaction of the relevant specialist officers. Your officers consider that the application would comply with the relevant development plan policies, and on that basis, it is recommended that planning permission is granted.
Thank you, Paul. Now I have a number of speakers registered for this item. The first one is the representative of Henley Town Council, which is Tom Buckley. Are you there, Tom?
I am indeed.
You are there. You have 5 minutes from when you first start. What's talking, Tom?
Good evening and thank you. I would just like to call out that the Henley Town Council recommendation is to recommend refusal, as this is in conflict with several policies in the South Oxfordshire local plan. That is H16, backland and infill development and redevelopment, with regard to the extension of the build limit of the settlement, N1, landscape and countryside, due to the effect on the setting of the AONB, and DES 1, delivering high quality development, DES 2, enhancing local character, due to the development actually failing to enhance the local character. I'll just call into those a little bit more. The Children's National Landscape boundary is approximately 100 metres from the rear site boundary. The South Oxfordshire plan calls out that South Oxfordshire want to try and maintain a boundary between Henley and Harpston. This property will be located at the top of the hill. Going back to what previous your planning officer called out, my understanding is that the landscape architect and the tree people have got some concern with respect to the amount of glazing and the location of the tree planting regarding to the level of the building, because this is actually a site that will be situated right at the top of the hill and will be seen from the cricket club at the bottom. Now, if we want to enhance the local character of the area, we want to make sure that all housing on that Henley area is hidden from the Harpston bit. That valley is the boundary between Harpston and Henley, and we want to make sure that it remains a boundary. As soon as we start putting something on the top of the hill where it can be seen from top to bottom, we're starting to break into that boundary. And that is our main concern. Everything else, it's great. You know, we have acknowledged that the architects and the owners have tried to amend the plans as much as they can. But we're still in a position that these two properties, the second property being the main issue, is that it will erode the boundary. It will be the first step to eroding the boundary. It is, in terms of scale, appearance and siting of the dwellings, will erode the undeveloped rural character and appearance of the hillside to the south of Rotherfield Road, which provides an adverse impact contrary to policies N1, DES 1 and DES 2. The limited short-term benefits of granting permission would not outweigh the harm identified by the council. The biodiversity assessment is not considered sufficiently robust, and as such, the proposal is contrary to policy NV3. And that's pretty much I've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Buckley. Richard, have you got any questions of this Buckley? Councillor Gordon-Creed.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Tom. May I ask why you feel the biodiversity report isn't robust enough? What's missing for you?
The application submission has failed to adequately assess the impact on an important European protected species, the great newts. We have a risk that if we start to build on that site without proper biodiversity impact, we're moving from an urban area to a country area, an area of national beauty. Now, I don't believe that we don't believe, from Henley Town Council perspective, that sufficient biodiversity impact has taken place to prove that that boundary can be maintained.
Any further question? Oh, Councillor Rob.
Good evening, Chair. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor. My question was about the line of built form on Rotherfield Road. And for me, a concern that I have, because I have a big concern about taking that line of built form into the Harpston, into the visual space of the Harpston Valley. But I can see that to the east of the development site, there is a property that sits almost next to where this new proposed building will go. So can you talk us through that, please?
Yeah, sure. We actually had the owner of that property come in, and he was able to sort of take the photographic. You may or may not have it in your pack, but he presented photographs to us that showed, based on the plans, his interpretation of where that was going to sit, and he overlaid that with the interpretation that, a photograph from the bottom of the hill showing up to where the his property sits. His property is actually invisible from the bottom of the hill, and that's where I go back to the point we said before. In terms of the amount of glazing and in terms of the amount of tree positioning, the height of that property will still, for the next 20 years, be below the tree line. Above the tree line. Those trees from his property are mature trees. His property sits below the tree level. And also, we've not had any evidence. It was asked last time when they had the 3 properties rejected. They were asked to present evidence of what that would look like from the bottom of the hill. They've never presented it. They've never put it into the plans. They've been asked a couple of times to show what it would look like. This is why the neighbour next door had to do the interpretation himself.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Buckley. Thank you very much. Right, my next speaker is Adam Warby, who's a neighbour. I think I saw him online.
Yep, I'm here. Thank you.
You're there. Okay, and you have 5 minutes when he's stopped speaking.
Thank you very much, and I'll try not to be repetitive on some of the points that have already been made, but my remarks today are focused almost exclusively on plot 2, which is the lower plot here, which we object to strongly. And this is a very large house, a 7-bedroom house, and it's now proposed to sit on the site of what is actually an old tennis court on the original site here, causing it to sit prominently out of the ground. The modest reduction in scale, positioning and landscaping since the holding objection in January does not, in our view, change the fundamental impact and the prominence of this building. We just don't simply believe there's anything need for something of this scale, height or prominence in the plot, and urge serious consideration to protect the unique character of Harpston Village and Valley. In the January 2024 recommendations, the planning officer did note that the scale of the proposed building should be reduced and verified photo montages produced to illustrate the revised proposal. I think that's what Tom Buckley just mentioned. We've not seen any photo montage, and in my view, plans need to be seen to be believed. Secondly, the planning officer also noted the Belvedere, that's the plot to the east, we're to the west, although that wasn't noted in the report, has an adverse effect on the view of the AO and B. Plot 2 has moved since then 5 metres to the north and slightly further up the hill, and it notes in this report that it's 2.85 metres higher than Belvedere, in fact more prominent than Belvedere. That's a whole story. 2.85 metres is equivalent to an additional story, not a trivial amount. So I think that the committee needs to assess that impact as has already been described. The other changes made to plot 2, as acknowledged in 7.13, have only slightly reduced the built form by reducing the width by 1.5 metres, and this will make little difference to its massive and overbearing nature. It's clearly going to set a precedent for the remaining gardens. You know, ironically, that includes ours. And it's clear that approval of this development will inevitably create a continued sort of lower ribbon of development along the Hertfordshire Valley and cause what I believe would be irreparable damage to the character of the surrounding landscape, and particularly on the AONB. The judgment the planning officer is applying in 7.5 of his comment should be balanced with these points of broader impact. The final point really is the long list of landscaping requirements suggests this development isn't suitable for the site. They include the requirement for the council to police the plot 2's back garden for over 20 years. As noted before and has already been commented, it's going to take 15 years for the screening to be effective. It was also noted there that any owner would want to remove the screening as it began to prevent the views from the south. It's inevitable, despite proposed conditions, that clearing, vegetation and screening will happen, as it has done already in Belvedere and in the most recent development at Highleys, which is the one that's further to the west of us. So it just brings me back to the fundamental point of this development. It's too large for the plot and too prominent, and surely there must be a more acceptable lower impact alternative that should be looked at and demanded. Of course, as neighbours, should this be approved, we're very concerned about the direct impact on our garden. We'd ask that the overall level of this house was dug further into the hill, not sitting on a tennis court. We asked that a condition is placed to refuse windows in the basement level, which is above ground. Also, that the balconies should be refused, although screening has been recommended. I don't think there's any need for balconies overlooking a private garden. And we also would ask that, due to the driveway, the new driveway that would run down the side of the property here, that will cause traffic noise into a private garden, that there should be some form of sonic wall or fence to prevent that. So did I hear I've just up on time? Is that right?
Yes, just about.
Yeah. No, well, those are the final points, and the conditions that we request are considered should this be approved, but clearly we believe it shouldn't from the previous comments. And
Okay,
that's me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Warby. Committee, has anybody got any questions? I see none, so thank you very much for your time and your presentation. Right, I will say our final speaker, it's not the final speaker. A supporter of this is Henry Benner. Henry, yeah. Again, Henry, you have 5 minutes from when we start speaking.
Thank you. As you might know, I'm a town planner and agent for this application, and I've previously addressed the committee on a number of other applications. I'm also a resident of the district and long-time worker, and I always want to bring forward good development. The district needs homes of all sizes and shapes. The preference is that development occur in higher tier places such as Henley. This site is not itself in a protected area, but we do very much acknowledge that there are sensitivities to the site as per my slide 1 and also my slide 2. I didn't make the application for 3 houses. I came in after that decision was made by the council, but I did feel that this site could be reasonably developed with 2 houses, provided care and attention was paid to design and landscaping. In particular, the reason why 3 houses probably wasn't right was there wasn't enough space for planting. This scheme puts that right. As you'll have seen from the site plan which was displayed, the previous speaker said that the second house was a massive overdevelopment. If you look at the size of the buildings which are shown there, plot 2 is clearly not the biggest house in this area, nor is plot 1 in terms of footprint, nor in scale. The officers have judged the application against national, local and town neighbourhood planning policies and find that it is acceptable and in accord with those policies. The town council suggested H16 might apply, but your officer's report says H16 does not apply. There may have been, you may have thought there'd be some suggestions that refusing this application might mean that nothing would happen on this site. I don't know how many of you visited the site, but you'll realise that the site is quite tired and it will have to be refreshed in some way, and someone new will come to the site. The site has extensive permitted development rights, which would allow extensions to the houses at more than one storey. It would also allow large outbuildings to be provided in the very large garden. Development would occur on the lower areas of the site without doubt. So there will be some element of change occur on this site. But what we have tried to do is really balance the need for some development and to make sure that it doesn't have the harmful impacts that have been suggested. On the aerial view that you saw, the cricket club is clearly a big break between Harpston and Henley. When you're in the cricket club, you can't see the site. There's a massive wall of trees there. When you're in the valley, you can't really see the site. You can see some houses, and that's to be expected when you're on the edge of the third largest town in South Oxfordshire. But seeing some roofs, some houses, is that so much of a problem? The existing house is white painted, but the proposal that we're to do here is to have muted tonal colours of brick and traditional tiles, not white paint. As you'll see from the images at numbers 5, 9, 11, 13 and 15, there are always some houses in this view. But I'm very clear that there is a decent separation here from Henley to Harpston. The very bottom of the site is too steep to be developed. That will be an area that will be planted. There was a suggestion that a 20-year landscape management plan might be unusual. Well, actually, the council's policies are all drifting towards much better management, long-term management for the good of the area. That's a normal thing now. This is not an exceptional site in terms of what needs to happen to make it fit in. We very much studied the area. I'm disappointed that the town council says we haven't provided images of what the site would look like. Images were provided. We provided a full landscape visual impact assessment. This is only a single house, but this has had an awful lot of input. It took us a long time to develop the scheme after the refusal. Even during the application, which was submitted last December, we have refined and got this scheme to a point that Oxford feel they can support it. The criticism of biodiversity is not right. 3 different council ecologists have looked at the scheme, and they've now found that it is acceptable. It results in a benefit to biodiversity, which is a benefit of the scheme. There was a suggestion that the future occupiers of the house might remove the screening which would be planted, but as I say, on the sectional view, as you look down the cross section, you see the planting is being provided on the lower section of the site. We deliberately didn't put trees next to the house to screen the houses, simply because of that criticism, that the trees have been put far away so that there wouldn't be pressure to remove those trees.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. Committee, has anybody got any questions? Councillor Rob.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Henry. Would you mind talking us through, on one of the previous slides, we could see that we've been behind Harpston Cemetery, and there were some lines on the page showing us Belvedere, showing us the site, and I just wanted you to talk us through that if possible.
I changed what I was going to say to react to what the people were going to say beforehand. So
that's all right.
There's a different image with 4 lines on it, but
yes.
this one is showing under the rightmost yellow line, that's Belvedere.
Yeah.
And under the left line, that's the existing house at the Mount.
Okay.
I was going to say something different on the image that has 4 lines on it, which was just to point out that the leftmost image there, is Highley's, which is the one that the officer also displayed, which is the very wide house. That is more obvious from Rotherfield Road, and then so in this case, Belvedere is the blue line, and the site is the orange line.
And this was obviously taken in winter when there's no leaves.
Yes, this is from outside the cemetery as you're going up the hill.
Yes, I know you.
Towards, because there are some other images that we've got in our pack. But if I was to 5 metres back, I'd then be behind trees, and you can't see this. You have to find a position to take a view. Really, in that area, there are dynamic views of people travelling through the area rather than in a fixed position. The cemetery is a slightly more fixed position, but it's very much in the bottom. As you go up the hill, the tree cover is very thick, and you can't see through the trees to see across to Hendon.
So what site 2 is, where this skinny orange line is, it's forward of the skinny orange line.
Well, it'll be dead in line with it, so you wouldn't notice the difference between the two houses. In this particular view, plot 2 would sit exactly in front of plot 1.
Yep.
So it only looked like one house.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's not an easy one to understand. That's,
No.
yeah. Right, committee, any further questions? See no further questions, so thank you very much. I now go to the local member. I think would have been here tonight in place of Councillor Arlott, but he has another meeting. So Councillor Gabrashak, you have your 5 minutes as local member.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Right. Thank you very much. The committee, I would absolutely and utterly urge you to reject this planning application. I have no objection to plot 1, but that's not the totality of this planning application. Plot 1 actually mirrors the existing houses that are on Rotherfield Road. This clearly is backland development. And I will quote from the officer's report. In paragraph 7.3, it is stated that infill housing developments and proposal for the construction of self-build dwellings. This is clearly not a self-build dwelling. It is a developer building 2 houses in the site. Moving on, we have talked about Belvedere, which is the property that we're talking about next to it, which is next to this property. And in the planning officer report, it is stated that that particular development was a mistake that should not be repeated. That is paragraph, I will find that paragraph in a moment. Oh yes, paragraph 7.12. It says, in the setting of the CNL and compounding the adverse effect of the adjacent property Belvedere. So even in the planner's report, it is stating that this will have an adverse effect on the thing. My concern is this is backland development. What is to stop every property in this road actually putting the sites up for planning to actually create a domino effect where we actually have development going on continuously. And finally, I would like to talk about the impact on the ANOB or the CNL, as it's now called. This clearly would have a detrimental effect on the ANOB and visually from Harpston. Bear in mind that this property, plot 2, is 2.8 metres higher than Belvedere. Belvedere already has an impact. This new property will have a major impact on the visual aspect of the ANOB. One other thing I would like to say is I did go on the site visit, and the committee, and I would like questions asked on this particular thing, have not been given the full landscape assessment by the landscape officer, because the officer on the site visit actually said that you have a summary of the landscape report, you do not have the totality. So therefore, I would like to see the totality of that landscape report before you make a decision. It's already been alluded that a photo montage has not been done. Therefore, can I say in conclusion that this would have a detrimental adverse effect? You have had many representations from councillors. You've had many representations from Harpston. You've had representations from Tame. So therefore, I would ask you to definitely refuse this planning application, because it does expand the envelope of Henley and it has a detrimental effect on the ANOB and the CNL. This would result in backland development. It pushes the perimeter of Henley out towards Harpston, and that should not happen because you would create a domino effect in this particular patch. Thank you, Chair. I will stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kabashek.
Thank you.
Committee, has anybody got any questions? No questions. So thank you for your time, Seven. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Right, okay. I must say at this point I've been contacted by the councillor for Harpston, who also expressed the same sort of thing, but he wanted to speak and I wouldn't let him. Right, it's time to go back to our planning officer. I'm sure you've got loads of questions for him to answer that have been raised by the speakers. Councillor Donald.
Just a quick one is looking at street view and so on. There's quite a lot of trees at the bottom of that plot, which the houses on the side haven't got. Will those trees remain at the bottom of the plot? It's probably the report. Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. I mean, what the landscape officers recommended. Well, firstly, some of the trees are protected, so that they have to be retained anyway. The landscape officer is recommending that the landscape scheme that we've got submitted at the moment is updated. So we have a condition to update that, and that will include all tree planting throughout the whole site. So we'll get an agreed, if the committee were to grant planning permission for this, then we would get a revised scheme submitted for liaison with the landscape officer to agree, and also our tree officer to agree a revised scheme, which would include planting throughout the entire site, and that would include trees at various levels. The one reason the landscape officer is particularly asking for a revision to the scheme is because they want more planting at a higher level, to be at the same level as the house, to provide more instant screening, because a lot of the planting at the moment is shown at lower levels, and obviously that takes longer for it to have an effect in terms of providing that screening impact.
Okay.
Strigoletti?
Yes. Well, could you? Well, I went to the site visit and I saw the neighbouring property Belvedere from the Harpston Road, and did notice the impact it had on it. Could you just tell us what the planning history of that site, that application of the site of Belvedere was? Was it one that the council gave permission for? Did it did we refuse it from the applicant when it's on appeal?
Yes, it was one that the council, quite a complicated history, lots of applications, but ultimately, eventually, they were able to gain planning permission at appeal for it.
So initially, this council
we did refuse. Yes,
refused it. Okay, thank you.
Are we allowed?
Yes, Councillor Godfrey.
Are we allowed to know on what grounds it was given permission at appeal?
I know. It's not that relevant. I think it's
Well,
a relevancy.
No.
It's a relevant. I think it's
But
a
I have
reasonable
another
question, and I'm thinking that same thing myself. But
Yeah.
it's not. No, I don't think it would help.
I do have another question.
Yeah.
So on the site visit, we talked about conditioning a long-term landscape condition plan. Was it 20 years or 30 years?
I believe, just check as it should be in the report. At the bottom, there's a list of the conditions. Recommended there. Minimum period of 20 years.
It's condition 17, isn't it?
Yes.
And so that, to the point that neighbour was saying about people wanting their view, so they would be, the trees would be growing, or the screening would be growing over those 20 years, shielding the house from the bottom. But after that, they could do what they like, pretty much, in terms of opening it up to their views. No, can't.
It's likely at that point they'll be TPO'd.
Okay.
The thing is, you can plant.
If there's a threat to them, then
Yeah.
that's dropped them.
Yeah, because the planting will have a range. You can plant trees at sort of higher standard trees, so they can go in at a reasonable size to start with, because they have to be of a certain size to be worthy of tree preservation. Also, in 20 years, some of those will have opportunity for that to be considered. at that time.
And that has been conditioned.
Well, we can't condition the imposing a tree preservation
No,
order.
no, but I mean the trees that go in that are worthy of.
It would be a judgment we'd have to make at the time, depending on on the amenity they have and their arboricultural quality they have. So, but the idea of this condition is to give those trees chance to develop, so that then that can be considered.
Okay. For the town council and the other assertions, this is backland development. Now, aware that backland development didn't used to be allowed. What is the current situation?
Well, the policy position, if I just take you back, so I'm just going to scroll through so I can find the relevant parts of the report to highlight. The starting point is the development plan is firstly Strat 1, which is the overarching policy, but also policy H1 of the local plan, and that explains that residential developments on sites not allocated in the development plan will only be permitted within the existing built-up areas of towns and larger villages, as defined in the settlement hierarchy. And then policy H4 of the neighbour plan talks about infill housing developments proposals for the construction of self-built dwellings as one of the options within the built-up areas. So it's very much a case of the assessment we've had to make is whether that's within the site is within the built-up area. There's no specific definition in policy H1 to say this must be infilling and this is the definition of infilling. There is a definition, but it comes in at policy H16, which is concerned with smaller and other villages, so a different sort of setting to the town setting that we have here. So it's very much a judgment based, and what I was mindful of this time is that we have already determined an application on this site previously. The concern that officers had on that occasion was with the landscape setting. We didn't have a concern with the housing distribution strategy.
Yeah, can I go back? It's not infill that the question was. It's backland development, which I know used to be not allowed. But I think what's the current situation on backland development, which this clearly is. But
well, it can be acceptable in certain situations. This is one situation where we're saying is, in the officer's view, it is in keeping with the council's housing distribution strategy.
That's all right. Yeah. And could you clarify the biodiversity? Because again, the town council picked up on that and said the biodiversity is not right. I think I'm not sure exactly what he said, but
yeah, but my understanding is that has been dealt with. It was an issue with the original application. There were two reasons. I think it was related to great crested newts and the biodiversity levels. We were convinced at the time that nothing had been done to those. With this application, has been looked at. The applicant has joined the district licence scheme, which means that basically great crested newts are protected off-site. So we have an off-site population, and they contribute. The developer will contribute to that, and that way it maintains the population in locations where they're better suited and newts can thrive. And then in terms of the general biodiversity, a metric's been submitted which sets the baseline, and the applicant has accepted that they will need to buy offsetting credits to be able to provide biodiversity gains on other parts of the site. There's also conditions to being applied to this for bird boxes on the site as well. So it complies in our officer's view with both the requirements of policy ENV2 and ENV3. And I think I've stated in the report this application predates mandatory BNG, so we don't have to go into.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. I'm just picking up on things that are raised and making sure we are clear on what that situation is, because Mr. Warmley is concerned about setting a precedent. That's not an issue that as a planning we can actually consider. Is that correct?
That's correct. We have to look at every individual case on its individual merits.
Yeah. Okay. Any further questions?
I have.
Councillor Tegerati.
We have in your report or in the recommendation, there's a lot of conditions that are set out. Is that because you believe that this application does affect the setting of the AONB?
Well, the position with conditions is that if an application can be, the government guidance is if an application can be made acceptable with the imposition of conditions, then that's the line that, that councils or local planning authorities should take in these particular circumstances. Hence, that's why, granted, if we didn't have those conditions, then yes, without those stipulations, because there are quite a lot, then there'll be a lot of holes in it. But we do have the powers to add conditions to help improve development in its final form.
Right. Thank you, Paul. I've got another question from Councillor Gordon Green.
It was just a question to do with that Councillor Grabcheck raised, and I see in your 7.21 that proposed development is a self-build development. Why does it come under that category?
I don't think it is. I think the reference to self-build has come from, I was quoting the policy H4 of the Henley Neighbour Plan. And so it's that's the reference. It's one of the things. It talks about infill and self-build. So I was just quoting what the policy says in the background. That's what that's reference is coming from.
Self-build.
It's not. Yes,
It's not self-build.
No. Okay.
No.
Okay, Councillor Rock.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Paul. A very quick one, and Councillor Gowshak referred to this. So at 7.12 in your report, you state that the landscape officer found the original plans relating to plot 2 had concerns because that felt that the plans would count the adverse effect of the existing adjacent property, Belvedere. So there's an acknowledgement that Belvedere has an adverse impact. What's concerning for me, and I wonder if you could talk me through your thinking, is that given that this proposed scheme will be 2.85 metres higher.
No, I'm not stressed. Why?
Just in terms of how you assess the impact of this, because we don't have visuals to see what the views from the Hartland Valley would be like with the properties, in situ.
What I firstly should say is that there were visuals submitted with the application, and they are available online. They are in the supporting documents, and they're what our landscape officer had requested, or certainly requested an update to the ones that were provided originally. And so our landscape officer has assessed those and given us an opinion. Again, their full comments are available online. And so we very much look to the guidance of our landscape officer on landscape issues. And they have concluded in this particular instance that the difference between the two sites are such that that the proposal would have a lesser impact than Belvedere does, and then any impact would be an acceptable one, sort of moving forward, particularly with the required levels of tree planting, lighting controls, and more appropriate materials. I think just to say, I think I've just got the difference here. So that although there is an increase in the height, it should be noted that plot 2 is also set further back, so it's 27.5 metres further back into the plot as well. So there's a certain amount of offset. They're not directly alongside each other, so there will be some offset for them. Obviously, that extra space does mean there's more scope for planting than there would have been at Belvedere.
Okay, any further questions? No further questions. It's discussed out. I need a motion then, please, that we can discuss. Councillor McDowell was first.
I said I was going to go with officer's recommendation on this.
Okay, is that seconded? I will second that. I'll go back to Councillor McDowell for his proposal speech.
My main concern, which has been discussed here, was the screening. Progress means that we're going to need to use land for building. It needs to be sympathetic with the character of the area. And I believe with the officer's comments there about the shielding and the materials used for construction, this fits that criteria. So I see no objection to that.
Okay, I will speak now because it's not an easy one to consider this. I did go on a site visit, but there are no technical objections to it. Our landscape officer is okay with it. All the technical people have said you've got reservations, but they said that they are covered by conditions, and therefore so I can't see any reason to refuse it. So I'll open it for debate. Is there any debate? Councillor Dragonetti.
Well, I was going to say, well, it's pretty clear actually that policy ENV1 says that development affecting the setting of an AONB will only be permitted where it conserves and, where possible, enhances the setting enhances the character and natural beauty of the AONB. Well, Paul has explained that the conditions, in his view, do mean that the setting of the AONB is conserved. But I just, looking through these conditions, all we have, I'm afraid to say, is the glazing, which has got to be, I'm sure the term is non-reflective glass or something, and there's something about the glazing, but it doesn't affect the real impact of the building, and the tree planting. And I don't think, if you go along that basis, that development in the AONB, which has a landscape impact, can be permitted if the glazing's okay, and there's some trees planted around it. And really, that just drives a coach and horse through the whole principle of the AONB and in our policy ENV1, because this application does not conserve the setting of the AONB, and it certainly doesn't enhance the character and natural beauty of the AONB. So on that basis, I cannot support this motion, and I think that the application should be refused.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Dragonetti. Councillor Roden-Creed.
I think where I struggle with this is on the principle that Belvedere really shouldn't have been built and did have an adverse impact. And so why would we do that again? Why are we saying that's okay? Regardless of mitigating conditions. I understand that officers have an obligation set by government to try and overcome in planning material conditions, but as it stands, that it just doesn't seem. That doesn't seem like a correct way forward. I don't know what we'd refuse on, but in principle, that upsets me.
That's a lot.
I would agree with Councillors Dragonetti and Gordon-Creed. I think this part of the Chilterns National Landscape is exceptionally beautiful, and it's also exceptionally fragile precisely because it sits on the edge of Henley, which is a tier 1 settlement in our new local plan where development is permitted, but development that it conserves and enhances the area of the national landscape. And I'm not convinced, it's a very high test. I'm not convinced that this does conserve and enhance. I have real concerns that we're going to be pushing urbanisation, light pollution, development into the visual space of that national landscape. And anyone who goes to, walks along there, cycles along there, knows that area, as I do very well. It's extremely delicate. It's extremely fragile. We must be very vigilant about not allowing development that could cause harm and that could cumulatively add to the harm and to the erosion of that very special part of the national landscape. So for that reason, I won't be supporting the motion, because I think we need to be absolutely certain before we allow a development like this that it is conserving and enhancing, and I'm not satisfied.
Okay. Councillor Sadler.
So I feel slightly conflicted by it because Councillor Kavacek said about background development. I think that's a really important thing, and I know you questioned Paul Lucas on it, but I didn't get the impression that he was saying yes, it's allowed.
it was a bit more of a grey area than that. So I think they made a bit of a mistake with Belvedere by the sounds of it. It sounds like that is background development anyway. It's obviously not a suitable kind of building for that environment. So I'm a bit on the fence, if I'm honest, because I do understand that there's some compelling arguments about tree screening and so forth, and there was some question about biodiversity net gain, which was mentioned as well. But yeah, I'm right on the fence at the moment. Thank you.
Okay, I'll go back to Councillor MacDonald to sum up.
Yes, I certainly agree that the house next door sticks out that sore thumb. You can see that quite readily from street view, but it's not going to be a white building. It's set back. It has screening and there's materials, so they don't stick out like a sore thumb. So I stick with my same, obviously, opinion on the matter and go with what the officer's recommendation is.
Okay, so we have a proposal for officer's recommendation, proposed and seconded. All those in favour, please show. All those against? That is lost. Okay, so I'm now looking for an alternative motion.
I propose a motion to refuse this application. The reason being that it's contrary to policy E and V1, and it fails that it affects the setting of the national landscape because it fails to conserve or enhance the character and natural beauty of the A&B. That's the sort of the basic reason. An explanation. I don't think the conditions, the glazing, which would take place straight away, but the trees, which are the condition, they're not going to have any reasonable impact for 20 years. So for 20 years, we can have the adverse impact on the A&B without any mitigation whatsoever. And we've learned the lesson with Belvedere, and I'm the only person in this committee who went down to look at Harpston, see the impact of this of the housing along the Rotherfield Road, both Belvedere, this house itself, the Mount, the original dwelling, and one further along. And I sort of say it reminded me of some parts of Europe, and there's these seaside resorts such as Torremolinos, where you have a sort of on a sort of skyline, a block of buildings that really do not enhance the setting. And I don't want Henley and this part of the A&B to replicate to some extent that sort of visual impact along a skyline of and coming down of these there's massing of building where failing to enhance the A&B.
Councillor Dragon, is that seconded? Councillor Rob, wish to speak now?
No, I was there, thank you.
Okay, it's open for debate. There is no debate. I'll come back to Councillor. Oh, sorry, there is Councillor Godfrey.
It's technically debate, but I also just want to point out the absolute paradox. This is in the national landscapes, and yet they're having to go off site to offset their biodiversity net gain, which is extraordinary. That's in itself.
It's a normal thing to do these days. So.
Well, except this is in the national landscape, and therefore that fact to me says there is going to be impact. It's by definition it is impacting the national landscape.
Improved last time. Mm-hmm. There will be another sitting for that.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Just going to talk to everyone. Yeah, you got it there. Yeah. Okay. Where are we? We're in debate. There is no debate.
Yeah.
I'll go back to Councillor Rob to second his speech. We'll then clarify what the motion is before we go to another vote. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Claire. I think it's all being said, but for me, the reasons are chiefly that I'm concerned about the impact on the views on the setting of the children's national landscape in this extremely sensitive and delicate part of the national landscape. I'm concerned in particular about light. I'm concerned about bulk scale and massing and the appearance, an urbanising appearance creeping down Drawback Hill and encroaching into the visual space of the national landscape. So that's my chief concern. And I remain concerned about the compounding of the harmful impact of Belvedere by this scheme. And I'm not satisfied actually that it remains large, 2.85 metres larger than Belvedere. So I'm not satisfied that it's sufficiently, I feel that the impact remains negative. And so for that reason, I don't feel that I can support this scheme.
Okay.
Yes, just some advice, please, committee. From what I've heard from Councillor Dragonetti and Councillor Robbs, that due to the bulk scale massing and urbanisation, contrary to policy ENB1, affects the setting of the national landscape in this particular area and fails to conserve and enhance the area. That I am comfortable with. I would strongly advise you not to keep referring to Belvedere. That was allowed to appeal. The inspector found that acceptable. I appreciate you have a different opinion, but for purposes of this refusal, I'd advise against that. In terms of biodiversity net gain, the offsetting is an option and that is acceptable. And in terms of reference to sort of the tree concerns, there is suitable mitigation that can be covered by condition. So I would recommend that those matters aren't taken forward as part of your formal reason for refusal. But if you're satisfied with the first part, that's what
It's simply the impact on the children's national land country policies, ENV1, DES1, DES2, I believe it was the South Office Road Plan 2035. And do we go to policy SD3 of the joint Henley and Oxfordshire Neighbourhood Plan?
Yes, the neighbourhood plan and policy as well.
And paragraph 176 of the NPPF, but I'm not sure what that is.
Yes, we would.
Same reason it refused last time.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to sum up, Councillor Dragonetti?
Yes, well, thank you. That's really helpful in getting to the nub of the issue here, which is that as the NPPF says, great weight should be given to conserving and enhancing the character and qualities of the national landscape. And this, as Councillor Roberts pointed out, this is a sensitive part of the national landscape, and should therefore be protected. And therefore, the application should be refused.
Okay, we have a proposal for refusal on the grounds that we've just discussed. All those in favour of the proposal for refusal, please gaze. 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 for refusal. All those against? Abstentions? Okay, so that is refused. Right, we'll move on to agenda item 8. Roundswood 20 Walton Avenue, Henley-on-Thames. And the planning officer is Victoria Cobb. Hey, Victoria.
Thank you, Chair. I'm the case officer for this application. The application has been referred to committee because review of Henley Town Council conflicts with the officer recommendation for approval. The site is located in a built-up residential area of Henley and fronts onto Walton Avenue, a private road that is lined by trees that are protected by a tree preservation order. The site does not fall within any special areas of designation, but the rear of the rear garden boundary adjoins St Mark's Road Conservation Area, and a Grade 2 listed church lies opposite the site. The application proposes the demolition of the existing dwelling and garage, and their replacement with a 3-storey dwelling with a basement. The proposed dwelling would be large, but its design, with distinct elements such as the smaller front and rear gable features, breaks up the appearance and mass, excuse me, and officers consider it would not appear bulky. The main part of the dwelling is cited to say that it more closely reflects the front and rear building lines of adjacent neighbouring properties compared to the existing dwelling, which extends at great depth into the site. The proposed dwelling would sit comfortably within the street. Its height would respect the stagger in property heights along the road, and gaps would be retained excuse me, to the side boundaries and to the neighbouring built form to avoid a terracing effect. Officers consider the design and scale of the proposed dwelling would be proportionate to the plot. It would be in keeping with the character of the street, where there is great variety in scale, design and materials of properties, and it would not harm the setting of the conservation area or listed church. The proposed dwelling would have the greatest impact on a neighbouring property to the north, Wisteria House. Officers do not consider that this would be a harmful impact. Proposal will result in built form closer to the boundary with an increased eaves height. The neighbouring bedroom window faces the proposed dwelling, but the bedroom is served by a secondary window on the rear elevation of the neighbouring property. The proposal would not therefore result in a harmful loss of light to the room, and the side wall of the proposed dwelling would be sited sufficiently far from the window, approximately 5 metres, so that it would not be overbearing or result in a loss of outlook. Proposed windows on the dwelling being carefully placed and positioned to avoid overlooking. In summary, the proposal complies with the relevant development plan policies, and officers therefore recommend the application is approved with recommended conditions. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. Okay. Right. Our first speaker on this one is Tom Buckley again from Henley Town Council. Still there,
Thank
Tom?
you very much. Thank you. I'd first like to congratulate the architect on putting together some amazing drawings that totally misrepresent the height of the house, the plans, everything else like that. The road itself is on a reasonable hill. As the officers have said already, there is a variety of designs. However, no design is 4 stories. This is asking for a slightly dug-in basement with a ground floor, with a first floor, and with a attic roof conversion. The main challenge concern we have got is with the next door, Wisteria House. You're showing it very well there. That's a very good picture. If you can just leave it there, that's perfect. What you see now is the application site, and you see the level that second floor is at. The plan is to put a 3rd floor above that, and in doing so, what you don't see, in fact, you can see it through into the pictures there, through the glazing on Wisteria House, you will see 3 skylights. As soon as that height of the building goes to the 3 floors, the light in those skylights is completely diminished. Now, the neighbours themselves have said they have no issue with the build. Yes, it will cause concern, whatever else. Their concern is that they lose the light through those 3 windows. You will see from the picture in the shadows that extension is north facing. There is no other light coming into their ground floor. The Henley Town Council recommendation was to recommend refusal on the grounds the bulk and massing will be out of keeping with the street scene. There are no other 4-story houses. It is in conflict with DES 2 of the local plan because of that, and it's the wrong type of house for this location. Now, I appreciate it's not within the area. It's not within the conservation area, but it backs onto the conservation area. So if the conservation area is only for buildings and not for views, that's completely different. Look at the site there. That drawing's great because it sort of shows that this looks beautiful, but the house next door, they're not representing the height of the hill. Next door is further up the hill. Wisteria House to your right is down the hill. This will be a very large development on a site and on a property that is not, they're moving the property too close to next door neighbour. All they would have to do is potentially move the site backwards. We've suggested to them that as a potential option, they could move it backwards. They could try and position it so that it wasn't affecting Wisteria House and the extension that Wisteria House have. On those grounds, we had a very good presentation from the current owners of Wisteria House showing their impact for this property. Other than that, we don't really have an issue with the development. Look at the picture there, the plan there, compared to the drawing you just seen. They show the house being lower yet higher. Now I'll go back to the 25 degree or the 45 degree rule for the windows. If you can go to the rear view, you will see that the 45 degree angle has been taken from the extension from the patio. Yep, there. Yep. So by forward. Just then it was the back view of Wisteria House. No. The rear view of Wisteria House that showed the double glazing panes. That one. So the 45 degree angle was taken from the middle of those windows up. What you have to realize is that the skylights mean that the 45 degree angle for the property will be blocked. And on those grounds, that's why we refused. We will add to the start of it that there's actually some trees from the conservation zone at the very front of the property, some lime trees. We have to make sure they're preserved as well. That doesn't impact the development because it's simply the front, but we've also got to make sure that those are protected. Thank you.
Thank you. Committee, has anybody got any questions for Councillor Buckley? No, thank you much for your time.
Cheers. Thank you very much.
Okay, right. We have three speakers who are supporters. Simon, Mike, Alice Bromley and Warren Bromley. You have 3 minutes, you have 5 minutes between you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you speaking?
Myself and our architect Simon are going to speak, and Warwick's just going to show our pictures because we're not as technically savvy with having a presentation. Unfortunately, it's our first time.
But we're not used to that. It's
so
yeah, you do need to come to the table if you're going to speak. So
okay, Simon, you're going to speak. I'm just going to speak for a minute because I'm myself and my husband. So I just want to say thank you very much for the opportunity to chair and to the committee for the opportunity to speak about our home, Roundford. I'm Alice and this is Warwick, my husband. We were born and raised in a local area. We've actually lived within a 0.2 mile radius of this site for the last 10 years. And we've lived in the house that you saw a lot of pictures of there, that white brick 1950s house, for the last 4.5 years. And we have really deep and strong ties with our local community, therefore. And actually our neighbours, who are the only neighbours who've put in any objection to this application. And we have 3 young children who attend the local Trinity Primary School, and we look after our elderly neighbour. So we're super committed to this plot. And we want to invest our money here to develop it. The house is currently uninhabitable, so going into my 5th winter. It's never had central heating or anything put in it. It's the late 50s. And the connection we had with the community made us want to have a really sensitive approach to our design process and bring the property in keeping actually with the local area. We are building a 2-storey house with a roof, and inside that roof we'll have our loft conversion, and that's it. So it's a 3-bedroom house with a roof of similar size, scale and materials to all the neighbouring properties on our street. And we did pre-application to really make sure that we were in line with that. And my husband just has pictures of this. I think what the council said about our actual boundary to our neighbouring property that are complaining will decrease significantly with the new build. And actually afford them more sunlight, I think, in the evening, which they have complained about from our existing property. So we're really surprised by all this because we involved them in our process for a year, those neighbours, before doing our pre-app and while doing it, where they didn't voice these concerns, but it's their prerogative to do it. So we really come here to answer questions, open mind, open ears. Thanks. And I'll hand over to Simon, who's helping us.
Thank you very much. I hope you've all received my additional supported documentation that I sent to everybody that I believe addresses all the points that was raised by the Henley Town Council and the neighbours at Wisteria House. We spent a lot of time going through this development and with the great advice from our case officer through the pre-application advice, we made sure that it was a scheme that they do support. It is a scheme of proportions, height, form and materials as others along the road, as well as height. I'm also a resident on that road, and as a resident, I support the design as well. if I could address a couple of points that were raised there, the skylights that are put in are a recent addition from a garage conversion and a new extension done in the last couple of years. At the moment, the existing house causes shade on those windows. Yes, we're not denying it will cause a little bit more shade, but it is located to the south property, so it's kind of a bit more time in the shade during the afternoon to evenings, whereas the morning it still has light, and it is in a position where the neighbouring property has a quite a big slanted roof, which allows a lot of natural light into that. We don't think our proposal are adversely affected it. The tree to the front, we have put in a tree preservation order. We all love our trees along that road, and they will be protected, and they will be protected during the construction of the building.
I just wanted to add some point. The skylights they're talking about are fully upright. So actually the only way to block any light into them would be to be directly above them. And our current house shows them significantly.
You're okay for time, George.
That's okay. I mean, I don't have much experience with it, so if you have questions,
That's okay. We'll
yeah.
see if the committee have any questions for you. That was very well done. Thank you. Yeah, pictures are useful. Committee, have we got any questions? Councillor Codden.
I just have one question with regards to the siting that came up. Was that something that was considered?
The site of the building. So the existing building is quite deep along the boundary to Wisteria House.
because the best thing is always a picture.
This is the current. This is the proposed. So what we have done with the siting the main section and extension is we've actually pulled it in line with Wisteria House rather than the current building, which extends much further back, and we think is more overpowering at the moment than it would be.
Yeah,
Are there any other questions?
Yeah.
I've got a very quick one. Is this photograph accurate? Because the building appears smaller in this image than it does in some of the images that are.
So what you're looking at with those isometric images, so where you have all perspective removed. This is the architectural model into a real environment. So you don't where you get. So I've got one of the picture of one of the other houses.
Yeah,
it looks like where there's a flat roof or where there's a roof that isn't hipped. That will appear to taper if you look at it from. But yeah, that
is a 3D model, and it's all to scale, it's all to size. It's the drawings we do, so that is.
It's because it has the perspective.
It has been taken from behind the trees as it was near to the house.
Okay. Fine, thank you.
Councillor Sadler.
Sorry, I think you've already said which direction is south on that. So from Wisteria Cottage, is it the south?
So Wisteria Cottage is here.
Yes.
So we have the sun comes round like that, and so at the moment the building is here. You've got a 2-story section there and a single story at the back that at the moment create shade to those skylights which are in that section there. Our building will be
because the sun's coming from the bottom of the picture.
Yeah, so they will get sun at this time of that, but when it comes round to here, our proposed building, the front of it is in line with the existing. So we haven't brought it forward of the existing line, we've just reduced it at the back and the single story.
Yeah. So they'll get shade in the afternoon.
They currently have shade all afternoon, yes.
Yeah.
They'll just get
Currently.
the building shortens, so actually get more light.
And they design their skylights because they have shade from our current home. Afternoon, that's hence the architectural design they put in 2 years ago. Up to our boundary.
I don't know if I'm allowed to say it, but I spoke to the neighbour. He showed me how nice and light the room was. I subsequently realised that at the time we spoke, all the skylights were shaded. And he said, it's nice and light in here. So he wasn't aware of it, nor was I, but then we subsequently we took a photo and they're all shaded. So Well, I think the ambient light is
Very good.
is very good, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, any further? Yes, yes.
What are the finishes on the front elevation? You seem to have two.
Yeah, we broke it up. So we have
There's a colour picture with two.
a
Do you want to show?
brick facade here.
Sorry, what?
So the main kind of building is brick to the front, brick to the side, and that is it breaks it up with a bit of timber cladding on there.
All right. Yep.
All of these materials are
On the street.
available on the house.
Okay.
Okay, I'll say no further questions, so thank you very much for your time and presentation.
Thank you very much.
The local council did not wish to speak on this one. And therefore, it's back to questions for Victoria. If there are any. I see no. No, everybody's happy. Okay, thank you, Victoria. Okay, and I need to go for a motion, please. Proposal. Councillor Gordon-Creed.
I propose we go with officer recommendation on this.
Thank you very much. Is that seconded? Seconded by Councillor MacDonald. Wish to speak now, Councillor MacDonald? No, okay. Make your maiden speech or your proposal speech.
Well, I think this has been incredibly thoughtfully done, well thought through. I have nothing to say. You know, looking at what exists and what's proposed, I think they've done it incredibly sensitively, taken into account. They've in fact reduced the build form in terms of impact. The issue with the neighbours, I think, has been dealt with, and I think it's a great proposal.
Okay, thank you. Is there any debate? Councillor Sutherland.
Just picking up on something that Councillor Tom Buckley said. Was it Tom Buckley?
Yeah, Tom Buckley, yeah. County Council. Looks like Edley Kenley to County Council.
Yeah, because what he said was that there's a variety of different designs in the road. So I think actually this design kind of lends itself to that. So I certainly do support it.
Okay, thank you. Any further debate? I'll go back to Councillor MacDonald for a second.
What's been said, I agree with. But just to thank the applicants for coming forward. I know it's quite scary coming from a person, but you did a very good job. And my concern about the shading, you fully answered. Thank you.
Okay. It's back to Councillor Gordon-Creed to sum up. Do you wish to sum up? Anything more to say?
No.
Nothing more to say. I'll just go straight for a vote then. We have a proposal for officer's recommendation, proposed and seconded. All those in favour, please show. That is universal. That is unanimous. It's a new word, universal. Unanimous. I'd like to go any further, so thank you very much. Thank you very much for your time. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. All right. My mouth's dry. Not anybody else, so I'll have to find it.
Before you go, did you say there was a basement?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're in the radon affected area. Have a look at that.
It's part of the archaeologist, ex-Bromage councillor. So.
Oh,
Just share that.
Lane Chinner, and the planning officer is Paul Lucas.
Thank you, Chair. This application seeks full planning permission for the erection of 2 dwellings. This application follows on from a previous refusal of outline planning permission for the erection of 3 houses on the site in 2022. This is a material planning consideration as this previous application was not refused due to conflict with the council's housing distribution strategy. Your officers consider that the proposed residential development would constitute development within the built-up area of Chinner by local plan policy H1 and neighbourhood plan policy CH-H7, as discussed at paragraph 7.2 to 7.5 of the report. As outlined in paragraph 7.6 to 7.9 of the report, your officers consider that the impact of the proposed development on the character and appearance of the adjacent recreation area and existing residential area would be acceptable. Your officers note that the proposed dwellings would achieve the recommended horizontal separation distances and a 25-degree line of sight from the centre of the closest ground floor rear windows, as set out in the joint design guide. On this basis, your officers considered the interrelationship between the proposed dwellings and their closest neighbours would be acceptable in respect of light outlook and privacy, as covered in paragraph 7.10 to 7.12 of the report. The proposed outdoor amenity space would accord with the design guide recommended standards for dwellings of this size. The local highway authority were consulted on the current site plan and were also asked to comment on third-party concerns relating to fire engine access. Their response dated 26th of September 2024 was omitted from the council's website in error, but has now been uploaded. In the expert opinion of the local highway authority, the retained fence line would not obstruct the required 2 metre by 2 metre pedestrian vision display, and the width of the entrance is 4.4 metres. The dotted gates shown on the plans are the existing ones to be removed. The access point would be suitable for fire appliance access, and the current proposed access and parking arrangements would not give rise to conditions prejudicial to highway and pedestrian safety, in compliance with local plan policy trans 5 as outlined in paragraphs 7.14 and 7.16 of the report. Your officers consider that the requirements of mandatory BNG and local plan policy ENV2 would be met by the proposal, subject to the standard BNG condition, on-site biodiversity enhancements and control over external lighting, as set out in paragraph 1.18 of the report. Your officers consider the provision of 2 3-bedroom dwellings would contribute towards the identified district-wide need in general conformity with local plan policy H11, as discussed at paragraph 7.19 of the report. Matters relating to drainage, tree and hedge protection, landscaping and carbon reduction could be dealt with through the recommended conditions to the satisfaction of the relevant specialist officers. Your officers consider that the application will comply with the relevant development plan policies, and on that basis it is recommended that planning permission is granted.
Thank you, Paul. I have 2 speakers. First one is Mrs. Hull, who is an objector. Is there Mrs. Hull?
Yes, I am. Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Good evening to everybody.
Okay.
So I'm
sorry. Can I've skipped my order. Can I just go back to Councillor Mackenzie?
Yeah, sure.
Good evening.
Sorry, I've missed your line list.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Right, you have 5 minutes when you start speaking.
Thank you. Chinner Parish Council objects to this application on the grounds that it is not infill. It does not meet South Oxfordshire Local Plan 2035 Policy H16 definition, which is filling in a small gap in an otherwise continuous built-up frontage or other sites within settlements where the site is closely surrounded by buildings. Nor does CPC consider that this is an appropriate backland development as there is no public access. The site is not allocated for development within the Chinner neighbourhood plan, and proposals do not meet Chinner's stated housing needs within the Chinner neighbourhood plan, section 4, policies that include infill, tenancy mix and retirement housing. Chinner Parish Council considers that the proposal does not have regard for local housing need as specified in the above policies, being 2 market value properties. CH7 extends the built limit of the settlement, and CHGP2 the loss of biodiversity and the failure to meet the requirements within the Chinner neighbourhood plan of increase of biodiversity. In your SODC report in section 6, the policy and guidance of the planning officer's report, Chinner Neighbourhood Plan is not included as part of the development plan, and therefore those policies set out in SODC local plan have been given precedent over Chinner's Neighbourhood Plan. This is disingenuous, as Chinner Neighbourhood Plan not only forms part of the development plan, but its policies take precedent in non-strategic matters at this time, since it is the latest plan and the emerging local plan has yet to be made. Under section 6.3, it is stated that Chinner Neighbourhood Plan carries full weight in decision making, but then only cites selective policies as being relevant. The significant omissions are those policies relating to local housing need in Chinner, notably CH1, which is an infill, to provide an opportunity for sensitive small residential units contributing towards the specialist housing needs, and CHH3, the tenancy mix, proposals for residential developments to have regard to local housing need, and CHH5, proposals for retirement housing. These policies override those in the local plan regarding housing need. This is the purpose of the neighbourhood plan for villages like Chinner, to ensure that they do not get overwhelmed by inappropriate, overpriced market value housing, which residents do not want, cannot afford, and do not meet their needs. The NPPF is clear that housing should be sustainable and should meet local needs. As such, local housing needs are a material consideration and should always be considered when there is a made neighbourhood plan, particularly one whose policies take precedent over similar policies contained in the local plan. Policy CHH1 and CHH7 take precedent over SODC Strat 1. Section 9 of the Planning Balance and Conclusion, item 9.1, states that the proposals would be in accordance with relevant developmental plan policies, supplemental planning guidance and government guidance as detailed in the NPPF. This statement is clearly not true, as these houses do not meet the housing and other policies contained within the Chinner Neighbourhood Plan. These are two market value houses crammed into a small space which do not meet the specific housing needs of Chinner residents, nor is the principle of sustainable development met by this development. We ask that this application is refused as it is contrary to these policies contained within the neighbourhood plan and the NPPF. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kendall. Committee, have we got any questions for? I see none, so thank you very much for your presentation and your time. Right. Well, now I've got to Mrs. Hull.
Hi, good evening again.
Yeah.
I think,
could we see you? Could we see you, do you think?
Oh, yeah.
Switch your camera. Yeah, that's better.
Yes. Okay. So I think the councillor have said most of it, but what I am going to read is from my neighbour as well as ourselves. So the building proximity of the residential amenity, the current site plans reduces a distance between the proposal building to the boundary within 43 and 45 Oxford down to 3.4 metres compared to 5.5 metres in the 2022 refusal. This is because an overbearing presence of the building height of proximity dominates the outlook from the neighbouring gardens. Overshadowing and the reduced distance significantly increases overshadowing neighbours' gardens. The loss of privacy of the garden users. Cramped development, narrow site and closer distance creates overdevelopment feel contrary to the policy aims. This harms the landscape settings, character and appearances of the area, conflicting with the policies DES1, DES2 and ENV1. with the South Oxfordshire Plan Local 2035. Consistently with the 2022 refusal, the 2020 refusal already deemed 5.5 metres too close, reducing the distance to 3.4 metres, worsen these issues, making the current proposal even less acceptable. Rights of access. Bloor Homes grant rights of access for maintenance and upkeep. Bloor Homes did not grant access rights for construction. Bloor Homes did not grant right access for building and development. On that basis, there's also the Highway Authority. Of the last consultation on the 10th of September 2024, it was based on an outdated plan dated on the 4th of September 2024, where the close border fence was removed. The reinstated close border fence submitted on the current site plan dated on the 20th of September 2024 is identical to the configuration previously refused on the September 2020 due to the visibility and safety concerns. The September 2022 Highways Authority refusal states, access to the site is via the access with a closed border fence, either side which does not prove any visibility, either the side of the egressing vehicles. These safety concerns remain unresolved and with the current plan. The importance of the visibility of the highways and pedestrian safety, now that the closed border fence has been reinstated, creates the same hazards previously identified by the Highways Authority in September 2022. Policy Trans S5 of the South Oxfordshire Local Plan emphasised the need for safety and function access for vehicles and pedestrians. This is unsolved safety concerns from 2022 remain relevant and should be weighed carefully on the committee's deliberation. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Hull. Committee, have you got any questions for her? I see none, so thank you very much for your time and your presentation. Okay, I now move on to Nathaniel Hill, who's the agent. Nathaniel, you have 5 minutes like everybody else. Start before you start speaking.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to present some brief comments regarding this application. Members will note the officer has recommended the application for approval. That the applicant has worked in conjunction with your officer to ensure the application before you meets all your policy requirements, and indeed the design of the two houses has been refined during the process to ensure the new dwellings blend into the environment in an acceptable manner. Again, this is worked through with your officer. No application is without challenges, but the previous outline plan application previously mentioned was not actually objected by the parish. These can be seen in section 2.1 of the delegated report of the refused application. Despite not being as thorough as this application, this seems to be at odds with their current stance. The current application, however, after careful design and investigation, has now successfully addressed all matters and received support from forestry, ecology, drainage and highways, and indeed your planning officer. The planning officer has detailed the reasons behind the recommendation for approval in his report, so I won't go over them again. I hope you will agree we have worked extremely hard to deliver a proposal that is non-contentious in planning terms and will add in a small way to the housing need of the district. In summary, please note the following. The daylight assessment clearly shows that the proposed properties do not negatively impact the neighbours' amenities. There are no overshadowings as seen in the report submitted. The site layout has been supported by highways that would not introduce any unnecessary dangerous parking or driving conditions. It should be noted that the proposed access is a spur from an existing road. The design, as can be seen, is supported in the supporting reports, shows extremely good biodiversity net gains, over 40%, and energy ratings over 60% increase above regs. The houses also have very good sized gardens. Plot 1 has a garden of over 300 square metres, plot 2 has a garden of 244 square meters, considerably larger than the gardens in the surrounding development. We'll be adding 9 new trees. There'll be 2 parking spaces for each plot and 2 visitor parking spaces. Home pavement will be used. There's over 50 square meters of communal planting beds and landscaping adding to the biodiversity. Also, the existing trees and hedges of the boundary will retain. We thank you for your time and going through this application, and we hope that you can support it.
Okay, thank you for your presentation. Committee, has anybody got any questions? Councillor Sadler.
Yeah, I just have one on highways because and apologies if it's already written in the report, but has the highway on Oxford Down been adopted?
It goes if you look at the drawing here, you see where you've got it comes between 45 and 49. Basically, it's unadopted from where you've got it. The pathway goes around to crosses the road from 45.
So
to
from 49
yeah,
to the access to the point of access to the site. Who owns that?
Law Homes.
Okay, and who pays? Who maintains it then? Who pays for that?
I suspect Law Homes.
So the residents of Oxford Down.
I suspect so. Yeah.
Right. So
it's not a planning issue, but we have right of access.
I'm just interested because somebody actually mentioned it in their objection online, and they were saying that it's part of their management fees.
Yeah.
So they felt it was worthy of bringing up.
Yeah, there's quite a few comments about that access. It's a legal issue, not a planning issue. So it is. It's a legal issue. It's not a planning issue. We can give them planning permission to build it. Doesn't mean to say they can build it. They might legally not be able to do it, but that's their problem, not ours. It seems strange, but they can get planning permission to build these houses and then not be able to access them. But they believe they have, so it's a legal issue, not a planning issue.
Just to back up what the chair says there, we believe that we've got right of access.
Do they believe they got access? No right of access, but that's not our issue, not our problem. I know it seems strange.
If you look, sorry, again, if you look at the Bloor Homes drawing that was submitted as part of the planning pack, you actually see there's a crosshatch showing that right of access.
Yeah, I did see a map like that. I can't remember exactly, but it did seem to. It's exactly where you said it stopped. So yeah, that's right.
It's a question that often crops up on this development and others. People think they know what the issues are, but until you get the legal advice, then you don't know what the issues are. Yeah. Sorry. Any further questions for Mr. Hill? No further questions, so thank you very much for your time and presentation.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Do either of the ward councillors wish to speak as ward councillors?
Yes.
Okay, you've got 5 minutes as the ward councillor.
Okay, many of the items has already been discussed, mentioned by Councillor Maggie Council and Surinder Poe, who've gone over the various things. So I'll try and skip over anything that's already been discussed, such as policy CHGP2. And I've just basically summarised a few items, namely that that area is not defined in the local plan, and it's not part of the Chin neighbourhood plan either. It would represent a biodiversity net. It would be biodiversity net data island, sorry, as a whole area is to be replaced with buildings, driveways, and a lot of hedgerows. It looks like the whole area, apart from the defined with a garden at the back of each of the properties, is to be built on. It would appear to be overdevelopment to the site and to neighbouring properties immediately. Loss of light to existing dwellings because they are quite small gardens, as Diego pointed out, between 39 and 45. So that's what they had to look on now. There's been repeated failed applications on this site previously. Skipping on, so yeah, the land could have been part of the original development, as one of the comments said online. but they chose not to add that. What they had done, it could have been designed accordingly. Road ownership is not clear, but I've already discussed that. Parking on the roads, due to insufficient parking, has caused concern to existing residents about road safety, and they are rightly concerned about the only access to the site in order for building the proposed homes will be through Oxford Down, which is a brick paved road restricted width due to car parking and a speed limit of 20 miles per hour. So it's a residential area where children play and so forth. Infrastructure does not allow for the new development in China, and there's therefore no parts on the existing plan, bearing in mind that the existing allocation has not been completed. So the other developments such as Greenwood Meadow, Manus Mead, and the non-allocated infills, which haven't been built yet, and not to mention the 9 houses on Lower Road that we approved last month, with no additional school places and no road infrastructure or shops. It's something we keep bringing up, but nothing seems to be coming forth on that. Due to tandem parking on plot 1, the reality of that will be that we'll have one of those spaces used. The other car for that residence is most likely to use the visitor space, therefore using up the visitor space. So any visitors or subsequent cars will most likely be parked somewhere else on the development. And outside other neighbours' houses. The previous application that Paul Lucas mentioned in 2022 was for 2 semi-detached houses and 1 detached house over broadly the same area. And actually, if you look at the build form, the 2 that have been proposed is kind of fairly similar, actually, in those built area. That's all I have at the moment. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Suther. Any questions for Councillor Suther? No. Okay, so thank you very much. Right, it's now questions back to Paul for questions for the officer. Councillor Lodge.
Thanks, Paul. I did have a question because obviously the previous refusal from 2022 is a material planning consideration. Can you talk us through the grounds for that refusal and why this one is different, why your view is different this time around?
Yes, the key difference between this application and the previous one was for 3 dwellings. It was also outlying with access and siting only. So in terms of one of the reasons was a highway reason for refusal. The layout we had with that scheme, which you'll see I've included it in the papers, so you can see it. There was a highway objection to that particular scheme. There were a number of concerns they had, but one of the main concerns was the fact that they hadn't demonstrated you could actually turn within the site. So in particular, the concern with visibility meant you would have had vehicles actually having to reverse out of there. So that scheme was not suitable, in part because they're trying to fit 3 dwellings onto the sites. They didn't have the space that they have with 2. They've got a bit more space available for parking and indeed landscaping on this particular occasion. So that's one of the key differences. And that hopes to explain a little bit why the highway liaison officer hasn't just done a complete U-turn. They've got different information to look at this time. In terms of the layout, obviously with the outline, we only had the siting. So what we didn't have the benefit of is the elevations that we do this time. So that has enabled officers to do a more if you like, in-depth analysis of what the impact would be. We can look at the relative heights. We didn't have that information available last time. We also, although the spacing is mentioned as 5.5 metres to the boundary, which in theory is greater than this one, what you also have was garage on the boundary, so a little less breathing space. And we also didn't have a clear idea as to what the height would be. They were just described as houses. And so therefore, if you take the lead from the housing next door, they're a lot higher than the ones that have been proposed now. So the guidance we've sought to rely on in terms of the horizontal spacing is the 12-metre rule, which is the back to side rule. So the back of the adjacent property to the side of the new property, that's in the design guide. And then the other key indicator to us is the 25-degree rule, which is where you take the centre point of the rear-facing window of an existing property and draw a 25-degree green line up, and the new build has to be below that line, mustn't break that line. If it breaks the line, then there could be an impact on light and outlook, and because it clears that, it's an indicator that it's acceptable. Obviously, I accept it's a matter of judgment still. Those are two indicators that we'll rely on to form the view that we have. So they're two of the issues. And the third one was reason for refusal was the visual impact. And again, we have a better idea of the visual impact because we have, for a start, there's fewer dwellings with 3 dwellings last time. This time we've got the two detached properties, and we're now aware that they're chalet bungalow style. So the idea is they step down, they are closer to the field and the edge of the recreation area. And the edge of the developments, they are closer, but they are reduced in height and bulk as well. So again, the view we come to is that would address the previous concerns.
Okay, any further questions? Councillor Dragonade.
Yes. Well, the first speaker was Mackenzie. Stressed that in her view, the Chinnow neighbourhood plan took precedence over SADC with our local planners. What's your is that correct? Really, or some of the matters that she was.
Well, it could, but there has to be a conflict between policies. And in officers in view, in this case, the policies sit alongside each other. They don't conflict. I know there was a reference to, I want to pick up on a couple of policies, CHH 5, which is retirement housing. Obviously, this isn't a proposal for retirement housing, so it's not something we can consider. And also the policy about tenancy mix, or tenancies to do with affordable and shared ownership, and again it relates to affordable housing, not market housing, so it's not quite the same as the policy H11 that we rely on to see whether there's a suitable housing mix or not.
Okay, because
Councillor Gordon-Green. Yep.
So the Chinnow H7, where it extends the build limit of settlement. So Chinnow's been very generous with their boundary settlement, but this does create more build form outside the current neighbourhood plan allocation. And this site, the Law Home site, is an established. There's children. There's it's a residential site that's established, and this is 2 houses that have been acquired. The land's been acquired retrospectively with 2 houses that were never designed to be there as part of this overall site, and so the impact on the amenities, this is essentially speculative development, which does not concord with the Chinnow neighbourhood plan. CH7, CH1. There's a few things that are at odds, and I go to Councillor Dragonetti's question, which is why does their plan not take precedence?
Well, as I explained, I thought there would have to be a conflict, and in terms of the principle of development, the Chinnow neighbourhood plan policies, which are referred to in the report at 7.4. Policy CH7 states that proposals for development inside the development boundary will be supported where they constitute sustainable development and are consistent with development plan policies. And CHH1.
I would argue that wasn't true in this case.
Well, if you let me finish, I'll come on. Policy CHH1 supports infill development within the Chinnow development boundary, provided certain technical matters relating to amenity of existing resident parking and turning, impact on highway network, loss of important open space, design and extension of built limits of the settlement can be addressed. And all of those factors are matters which you have to take a view on and make a judgment of, and that's what officers have done in this case. But obviously, it is open for the committee to consider those points and to form their own view on it.
Sorry, I'm formulating a question because of something you said the other day. Is this in the settlement of Chinnow or not? Is this?
Yes, it's in the settlement boundary.
It's within the settlement boundary, so it's not outside the settlement of Chinnow.
That's correct.
Yeah, okay, which is what we were told. So it's not.
No, what it is outside of is the built development. Built development, which is
you've either got a development area or you haven't. You can't sort of start subdividing it. the play area, which is to the south of it, is within the development area. Development
It's part of the settlement boundary. It's within the
settlement
settlement boundary.
within the settlement boundary. Not the developed part of the settlement boundary. That's what we're being asked to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But am I allowed to continue?
Another question, yes, if we want to clarify things at this stage.
No, that's fine. I don't have a question.
Okay, we finished that. Another question?
So is this backland development?
Not backland.
I mean, to be backland development, it would have to sit behind existing development and other properties. But I mean, where the countryside is, so I would normally have it between the rear of properties, and the countryside is to the northwest of the site there, and there's another property 47 which is closer to that. So in terms of extending, because the recreational area is part of the settlement, so it's an unusual site, but it's not backland development in the sense of extending the settlement outwards, which is where one area where backland development can be contentious and would be a situation where we wouldn't support it.
Rob, sorry.
I'm sorry, Chair. I just have a very quick question. Paul, could you just clarify for me one final time? The previous application was refused chiefly on highways grounds because the applicants couldn't demonstrate adequate turning.
That was correct. That was the main issue. The main issue was that, yes.
Okay. And there were other concerns around impact on the amenity of neighbours because there wasn't sufficient detail in that outline application for you to make an assessment about amenity.
Yeah, there were three reasons for refusal. Yeah. One related to highway safety.
Yeah.
One related to visual impact and proximity of the proposed development to the recreation area, public land, and the impact on the end of the close. And then also a neighbour impact concern about the proximity of the dwellings that were posed on the basis of the detail we had at that time. On the rear of the adjoining premises. I think that scheme backed onto number 43 and 41. So it's those properties that we were concerned about with that particular scheme. So there were the three reasons for refusal, and we feel in this instance that those matters have been addressed by the current application.
Thank you. One more question, please, Paul.
Yes, yeah.
Could you clarify how does this meet SALT policy H16 as infill, because it's not continuous built up frontage and it's not closely surrounded by other buildings?
Yeah, if I turn to paragraph 7.4 of the report, policy H16 is concerned with infill development in smaller and other villages. So unfortunately, it doesn't apply to a larger village such as Chinner. So the extra requirements for infill to comply with do not apply in this particular instance.
Okay, I think we need to move on. I note that Mrs. Hull has a hand raised there. I'm sorry, Mrs. Hull, we cannot take any further representations from yourself. Right, I'm looking for a motion then, please.
Go on. I'll propose officers' recommendation of approval of the site.
I'm looking for a second there. Thank you, Councillor Rob. Right. Wish to speak now or after the debate?
No, I'm happy to speak now, actually. Oh, sorry, Peter can speak.
Peter speaks first.
Thank you. Well, I think one of the critical thing is that there has a previous application on the site, which was approved in terms of the objections were on the highways, which have been addressed, and the it was only an outline application. I think this application has addressed those concerns, and I think within the balance of everything else, it's an acceptable development within and it is within the settlement of Jill.
Thank you, Councillor Tremaine. Councillor
Rob. Do I love it? No, I do not. But in my view, it does meet the requirements. It meets the policy requirements in our local plan. We've heard this many times at appeal before. A neighbourhood plan cannot rule out development. Just because it's not a site that's allocated for development in the neighbourhood plan doesn't mean that it cannot be developed. So we need to remember that. The NPPF explicitly says that we need to be looking to approve schemes that are similar to this one, which is to say in an accessible location in an existing village with amenities. So the previous concerns around highways, around visual impact, and the concerns around the potential impact on amenity of the neighbours have been addressed in this current scheme. And one thing I was concerned about, because it appears that they're crammed in, the actual amenity space for these proposed dwellings is much larger than the amenity space for the surrounding development, and it well and truly exceeds the requirements in our policies. So I don't believe there are actually reasons to refuse this. So I'm happy to support the officer's recommendation.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Rob. Okay, we go for debate. Anybody wish to speak in debate?
Yes, please. Unsurprisingly. So because I know the Law Homes development, my struggle with this is primarily in the building, of the impact on residents and amenities and roads and safety during the build process. Probably once it's done, possibly I think there will be a parking issue in the future, because there just always is on all of them. That's nothing we can consider now, but the safety issues and the amenity on the impact on residents during the build process, given that the access to the site is essentially through an established residential area that is that has residents with children that are used to playing with their scooters all around, they're not, this is not a site that is used to traffic and building, and so my deep concern is the impact during the build process, and I don't see any way to mitigate that. And that's a consideration, a deep consideration for me. Never mind the fact that Thames Water is going to struggle, but we can't consider that. So parking and the impact during the build process is huge for me. It's going to be a nightmare, basically.
Sorry, I was looking to see if there is a traffic management plan requirement, but there isn't. Councillor McDonald.
Quick one. I do feel for the council there, because they have spent time, as other communities have put together a neighbourhood plan, and I take on board the fact that that doesn't mean that you can't build elsewhere, but communities do this and put an awful lot of effort in to identify areas where building is, from their point of view, appropriate for the community, and try and preserve other areas. So I do feel that the whole neighbourhood plan gets blasted, but I've heard Councillor Rob and Dragonetti, and fair enough, that's the way that the planning system is. So I just thought I'd just put that out.
Okay, Councillor Sadler.
So yeah, I'm obviously against it. The proposal before in 2022 was for 3 houses, but Paul Lucas is glossing over the fact that two of the houses were semi-detached houses and the other one was a detached house. It was more or less the same kind of plan. It is infilled. They haven't addressed the issues of car turning spaces in that area. It is going to be more cramped, not less cramped. It has an impact on neighbours. The new scheme backs onto 39 and 41. If that was the concern before, then it still backs onto those houses as well as 45. particularly 45. Like I said before, Chinner is a village, and it's been forced to take up ever more and more houses. This is just 2. I don't think people in Chinner, I get the impression, I don't want to speak for them, but I get the impression people in Chinner are not against new housing. It's just that the infrastructure cannot take more and more housing. And if we just drip feed houses, 9 last time, 2 this time, what's it going to be next time? Another 5, another 6? I don't know. But it just creeps up and creeps up. And there's no regard for the fact that Chinner is a village, and it doesn't have a bypass. It doesn't have any shops, really. It's got 1 or 2. It's got a school which is over capacity. It's got no secondary school. All the kids have to go elsewhere. It's got no jobs. Everyone has to drive elsewhere. It's only the B4009 and the B418 or whatever it was that carry all that traffic in and out of Chinner every day. We can keep ignoring this, but the fact is that is the situation. It is a village, and we just keep on approving plans for extra housing in Chinner.
Okay, thank you. See no one else. Did you propose it?
I did, yes.
It is. I'll go back to Councillor Dragon.
Yeah, well, of course, it's always tough some of these applications, and I understand Chinner was objections to it, and they've certainly been having a lot of houses allocated and built. And I think this is a relentless tide, and I'm Chinner is going to be is being developed, but it is a larger village, and in our local plan, it's that's the what it has to I'm sorry to use these words, but also put up with them, really, because that's how it is. We with all respect to everybody in Chinner, and I congratulate the parish council, Councillor Mackenzie, obviously done a lot of work on her neighbourhood plan, has got it right at her fingertips. It's absolutely brilliant, and it's really good that we do have such a strong community there represented by her. So, but we do, no, I can't see any good planning reasons to refuse this application for these 2 houses.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Dragaletti. So I have a proposal for officer's recommendation. Proposed and seconded. All those in favour, please show. 4. All those against. That's 3. That is passed. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to agenda item 10, in Little Rose, Sampton St John, and it's welcome to Will Dennison. I'm you since the old days at Easter at Didcot. Not Didcot, but
Thank you, Joe.
Cool. No, where were we? Yeah, it's a long time ago.
Thank you, Joe. I'm the case officer for this application. It's before members this evening, as the officer recommendation for approval conflicts with the views of Stanton St John Parish Council. The application site comprises a section of stone wall located adjacent to Middle Road in the village of Stanton St John, falls within the Stanton St John Conservation Area and the Oxford Greenbelt, with listed buildings nearby comprising the Star Inn and Bassett House. Planning permission is sought for the demolition of a section of the stone wall to create a vehicular access to the field beyond, which would be served by a 5-car gate. It involved the rebuilding of the stone wall on either side of the gate in order to provide vision displays. It is a resubmission of a lapsed permission that was granted in June 2020 for the same development. The access is required due to an existing access to the fields currently through the car park of the Star Inn, which shall be lost due to planning permission being granted for the redevelopment of the public house site. Although I should mention that permission for the redevelopment of the public house has also lapsed, but I do know for a fact that that has also been resubmitted.
Okay.
The highway liaison officer, after having undertaken a site visit, has confirmed they have no objection to the proposal on highway safety grounds, subject to conditions. They highlighted that the carriageway fronting the site is subject to a 20 miles per hour speed limit. It is part of a one-way system, and there will be a level of setback and visibility appropriate given the levels of vehicular traffic and speeds along this section of Middle Road. The objection from the parish council is based on the request to add a condition restricting the tonnage and number of axles for vehicles that can use the new access. The Highway Authority have stated that they have concerns that such a condition would not be enforceable. I agree with their concerns about enforceability, and in conjunction with that, such condition did not form part of the 2020 permission, and as such, it is not being recommended here. In terms of the appearance of the works, whilst it would result in the loss of a section of historic wall, it is not listed, and it has been confirmed by our heritage officers that they don't have any, well, they didn't consider it would be inconsistent with the character of the area. They go on to say that the proposed 5-bar gate would be in keeping with other agricultural accesses and preserve the rural character of the area. In addition, it should be noted that the rebuilt sections of the wall would utilise stone resulting from the demolition to make the access itself. Please note that there is a change required to the recommended condition 3 in your packs. The condition as written requires the submission of a method statement for the rebuilding of the wall, and as it happens, that information was already submitted as part of the discharge of condition to the 2020 permission, and so I'm proposing that condition just be reworded to refer to the previously approved details. Officers conclude that the development is in compliance with national and local development plan policies and is therefore recommended for approval.
Thank you. Will. Thank you, Will. With one supporter, which is Steve Pickles. I guess that's you.
That's fine. Thank you.
You have 5 minutes.
Yes. Thank you very much for providing me with the opportunity to address you this evening with regard to this application for a new farm access to Middle Road, Stansted St John. This is a simple application that has already been approved by the council 4 years ago under application reference P20 S1424/4. Nothing has changed since then, either in relation to policy relating to the site or the characteristics of the site and its surroundings, apart from the introduction of a 20 mile per hour speed limit on Middle Road. There are no objections from the highway officer, the heritage officer, or the archaeological services. The proposed access is of a traditional design that will utilise the existing stone. We strongly endorse the assessment of your officer's report that the creation of the new access does not conflict with greenbelt policy or cause harm to the setting of listed buildings, the character and appearance of the conservation area, or result in a harmful impact to highway safety. It would also not be materially harmful to the amenity of neighbouring properties, especially considering the low number of farm vehicles that would use the access. The proposed development accords with the development plan as set out in the officer's report. We therefore consider that planning permission should be granted. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Short and sweet. Richard, anybody got any questions?
Yeah, there's one quick. It's not very, if you're assuming, very clear from the plan whether the line of the wall is going to remain the same, or is it going to be, well, the displays are going to
be set slightly further back to provide the vision displays.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's what the previous one said. Yeah. Okay. Are there any questions? I'll go back. Sorry, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Okay. We'll go back to the planning officer. Anybody got any questions for the planning officer? Nothing to dispute. Okay, can I have a proposal, please? Thank you, Councillor Roll. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, officer recommendation.
Officer recommendation. Seconder. Thank you, Councillor Roll. Is there any debate? Would you like to, do you want to?
I would just say this seems to me to be very straightforward. There's an extant permission, or that's now lapsed. This is simply, you know, reigniting a permission that's now lapsed. I don't see any reasons for refusal. There's no objections from highways.
No, okay.
Councillor Robson.
Is there any debate? There is no debate. Okay, we'll go straight to a, oh wait, you can sum up now.
Yeah, I've said it all. Let's go to
You've said it all. Yeah. We'll go straight to a vote. All those in favour, please show. Thank you very much. That is universal.
I'm sorry you had to wait so long.
Thank you, committee. Thank you. That's the end of the agenda.
Thank you.
It all says to me to wish everybody a happy Christmas.
Yes.
We'll see you in the new year.
Tomorrow.
Oh, I'll see. Yeah, I'll see you.
Tomorrow for the wine.